From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here.
Though dealing with a real universe with an acclaimed slave opera Omar, sardonic school administrator cheating in Bad Education, and the drama The Burial with its day in court, Michael Abels is a composer often pulled into the worlds of science fiction, right off the acclaimed bat in the provocative racial satire Get Out. Marking the brain-switching start of his collaborations with Jordan Peele, Abels' inventive scores for Peele have included Hands Around America Clones in Us, and a man-eating kite creature from outer space in Nope. Outside of that orbit, Abels' ability with musical irony played the nightmarish capitalist coffee table tentacle-scratching aliens in Landscape with Invisible Hand. But there's no bigger iconic universe for Abels to tackle than one in a galaxy far, far away, and now notably set 100 years before the Star Wars mythos we're familiar with, for The Acolyte. It's a plunge back into sometimes questionable Jedi rule and its effect on two twins, one vengeful and the other hoping to stop her warpath. It's a tale of good and bad sisters as old as time, as transferred to a world of space witches and the twisted Sith, a place given an instantly recognizable tone with the music of John Williams. It's a force of mythic symphonic feeling that Abels taps into like Obi-Wan to Williams' Qui-Gon Jinn for Acolyte showrunner Leslie Headland. But beyond his pitch-perfect ability to play symphonic melody, inspired by even older Force ghosts of Golden Age Hollywood composers, Michael Abels brings a whole other approach to The Acolyte, with the percussion of Forest Worlds, the lightning-fast rhythm of Sith saber assassin Fu, and the song-led realm of sorcery that evocatively opens up a whole new, older scoring world of Star Wars for Abels to explore.
And now here to tell us about scoring the ways of the Jedi, the Sith and twins rent asunder by light and dark forces, is composer Michael Abels. Welcome to Film Music Live.
It's great to be here, Daniel. Great to see you.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. And now, I don't know how old you were when the first Star Wars movie came out, but what was your experience of having that opening title sweep through you and just entering a whole new musical universe?
I saw the first Star Wars movie in the theater, and it had the effect on me that it has had on people ever since, where I just couldn't believe how amazingly awesome it was and how it made me feel. And I was one of the people who waited in line to see The Empire Strikes Back, which remains my favorite of all the films. And one of the main reasons is because of the incredible music.
Wow. How long did you wait?
I don't remember, but it was not days, but I remember sitting down in that long line around the theater. That's for sure. So it was more than an hour.
What do you think makes Star Wars music Star Wars music?
Well, John Williams is the beginning and ending of that question, but he defined it. I realized at one point I was thinking about this. I thought, John Williams is a genre. He really is. But Star Wars music is also a genre in which he occupies a very large part of that space. But there's other Star Wars music space as well. And one of my jobs was to help figure out what some of that additional space might be.
Now that brings us to our first question from Louis Versinelli. How excited were you when you found out you were joining the Star Wars musical universe? And did you feel any pressure knowing wholeheartedly the composers who've worked on Star Wars music previously?
Completely excited, thrilled, and highly, I can't think of a more intimidating gig, really. when you know what's come before and what may be asked of you or expected of you. But it's a thing where you can feel that pressure until you can't function if you choose to, and that's not the way to get the job done. If this opportunity is offered, you have to just wasn't it there's somebody we know who said you either do or do not, there is no try, right? So I guess that's what I had to evoke to do this work.
And Ivan at the Bond Music would love to know, the music is one of the most significant and recognizable elements in the Star Wars saga. Which theme, except for the main theme, do you love more, and why?
God, it's hard for me to. I try not to take something that I love or art and single it down to one thing that I adore. It's rare. Like, I can say I love The Empire Strikes Back, but I always feel when I say things like that I'm excluding lots of other things I love. So what I love always depends on the context, and that frustrates people when they want to know a favorite. But that's how I feel about any theme. That a theme to me is about a feeling, or it's like a literary theme. It doesn't necessarily relate to a person as much as we are told that they do. And so any theme that I think captures a feeling that either that a character's experiencing or that I've had myself in my own life, when I hear that music and it just hits that spot, I think, wow, that nails it, and I love it.
Wow. Now, one thing that really helps differentiate the show from the other Disney Plus ones is that it takes place 100 years before Star Wars starts. I mean, what does that open up for you as a composer?
Well, it opens up a lot of possibility of unexplored territory, even though within the Star Wars canon, that territory is explored very much. But it allows, I think it allows the storytellers to decide the details of what that world might have looked like. And I'm really following their lead on that, because as much as I feel like a true fan, I also haven't read the books, and so I'm not as steeped in the canon as many of the fan base. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at the story that's given, and I think, how do I tell this story from the character's perspective to help people understand what they're feeling and how they're making the choices that they make. And I very much, actually, even though I had read the story outline, there's one thing to read a story outline, and there's another thing to see the events that happen in front of you. And I got to say, I had the same reaction as I think a typical fan watching the series and understanding what was happening. And it was fun for me in that way, even when I was shocked and saddened.
Right. It's kind of a darker deal. I mean, there have been certain series that have gone really completely out of left field, like Andor, which is as far away from Star Wars scoring as you can humanly get. And what struck me about a bunch of your scoring for the Acolyte is that it draws on John Williams, but it draws on the more somber music of John, as opposed to, like, here's the exciting asteroid chase. This really kind of taps into the somber Star Wars sound of John Williams.
I think that's a really interesting. I never, I'm here a little. I never thought about that. I guess you're right. I think part of it is that the events of the show, are things that call for music of that type, and there was a definite between Leslie and I. There was a definite feeling that, okay, we want the score to, when appropriate, feel very traditional, and for people to just know we're in a Star Wars story. And then there were other times that the characters are doing different things that they haven't done, or acting in ways they haven't done in other series, and we needed music that explained those situations too. But there's a definite intention of making it very traditional in the moments where we thought that was the right way to go.
Right, and that brings us to a question from Esteban Cortez. Technically speaking, musically speaking, what would you say is the sound of Star Wars? An instrument, a chord, a technique, etc.
It's a great question, but it's not one that can be described in one answer. There's so much. It's certainly a style or a genre of music that's primarily orchestral, maybe not exclusive, but primarily, and then is done in a style that in Western music we would call a late romantic harmonic language. But then it doesn't have to be exclusively that. But those are a couple of the things. And there's also a way of it. I mean, music can be orchestral and yet not sound orchestral, if that makes any sense. But that is not the case with Star Wars music. To me, Star Wars music is music that luxuriates in the sound of a giant orchestra. And so I think whenever I think of music that is classically Star Wars, you can be sure that it's not only orchestral, but it's just feels like you're bathing in chocolate, sonic chocolate.
Lint chocolate.
Yes.
the good Swiss stuff.
Yeah.
You know what's fun about the show is that it draws from the very old chestnut of the good twin and the bad twin, and I think I'm good twin team. But how did you want to set up the characters of these girls?
Well, so starting from there, it was important to give them each their own identity, and like one way in which so May, who is the bad twin, if you will, she she's on a vendetta. She's got a kill list, and she fights without she's trying to figure out how to fight without a weapon, but meanwhile she has weapons, and she's very her moves are very much martial arts moves, and so she's given a very percussive, even her walking music is percussive, and her fighting music is definitely percussive. And that was a place where we were choosing to create music that maybe wasn't going to be sounding like a traditional Star Wars score. And excuse me. But then Osha, who is the good twin, she has a couple of themes that I associate with her, and one of them, which we don't hear a lot of, in an obvious way, but it is actually very vulnerable sounding, and it's a bit impressionistic maybe, and it has to do with her. When we first meet her, I think she feels a little personally inadequate, maybe because she failed as a Jedi, and that was her greatest life's wish. So she doesn't feel accomplished. And I think that where I came up with that music was in feeling that softer side of her, which she is not really wearing on her sleeve, but you can see in her how she interacts, like she's not that sure. So that's where I began. But also this series is really about it's about characters, a bunch of them, who are not entirely either good or evil, and they're a little morally ambiguous. And I think Leslie and the writers really deliberately set that up and are enjoying giving audiences a chance to figure out who they root for, or figuring out what they would do in a situation that's morally gray. And so that's part of why I think I relate to themes as being more about a feeling or a point of view, rather than relating to one character's way of being all the time.
I never quite figured out the Jedi as child protective services. And I particularly like the line because it's like the last episode, obviously the big climactic episode is tomorrow night. This is being recorded on Monday. Is this almost kind of this escalation of catastrophic misunderstandings?
Right.
What was it like scoring the kind of the big reveal that this whole thing has been going to?
It was, I as a fan, I was shocked. I was like, no, I mean, there's a character in the very first episode who is killed in the first 5 minutes. And I was like, we can't kill her, but it's already shot. No one cares about I mean, of course people care, but I'm having the reaction that fans are supposed to have. And I was having a fan reaction. And so what it's like is it's like having the experience of a fan of reacting to a scene and then thinking, okay, here's this emotion I'm having. How can I use that to write music that effectively captures that exact emotion? Because I consider myself like a musical actor in that, the actors are so, when you score film or media, you get to watch actors do their work again and again and again and again. And I'm always struck by just how incredible they are. Not just the stars, but even the bit characters, how great people are at portraying emotions that they're not really having at that moment. And I want the music to portray the emotion as vividly as the actors are portraying the emotion with their faces and bodies.
Right. So let's go to question from Pranav, and I guess we'll put this into context of the Acolyte. What's your way of composing the collaborative approach, and how much do you actually get what you want in your score after the revisions and things liked by you, but maybe sometimes not by the filmmaker?
Great question. So you have to come from that. It's a collaborative art from the beginning, and it's a very interesting creative challenge to be both very passionate about what you're creating and feeling like you're putting forth your best work, that you can look someone in the eye and say, check this out, this is really good. And at the same time, go immediately from there to when they say, I don't like it, to be able to go, oh, okay, great. What's not working for you? And be very much about helping them realize their vision. And holding both those things together in equal parts is really tricky. But it's kind of the key to being able to function in a collaborative environment. And you have to remember that the filmmaker is ultimately in charge of the storytelling, and the story, it's their call as to what the best way to do that is. And your job is to assist them in making good choices. And so in that sense, you're a media composer is like a consultant. Is like someone who's helping them make the musical choices based on your own experience and things that you've created. So while not everything that I think is a great idea goes into a project, sometimes the great idea I get to is as a result of the direct feedback of someone else. And the other thing is that it's surprising how much of even when you have to change your direction, it's surprising how much of your own voice remains in the direction that you are pointed in. So it's not so much about giving up, my artistic integrity as much as being pointed to a part of my artistic integrity that is helping tell the story.
Well, now you use the word passion, and I just cannot even begin to imagine a more passionate fan franchise than the Acolyte, particularly the Acolyte. I can't even comprehend John Williams dealing with that kind of stuff. But you've kind of, in a way, you've had to. You're a fan. What's it like, just as a composer, dealing with that whole other level of fan passion?
Well, I thought I was ready for it because Jordan Peele fans are passionate, but oh my gosh, Star Wars. If there's a more passionate fan base, I don't know what that would be. And it's really, really interesting. It's great to be a part of something that people care so much about, and I feel like some criticism is unfair, but then some of it is actually fair. And I read something, I think, oh, wow, and then other parts of it, when I see that there are people who are watching the show that are thrilled with it or more interested than they've been in other things, that's really gratifying. And it's intimidating to put yourself out there in such a public way, but it's also I think it's really gratifying, and it helps me, I think, be a better artist ultimately.
No, absolutely. Now, obviously, Jordan Peele, you've done amazing work for him. And Aaron Cruz would like to say, I love your work with Jordan Peele. What's the spotting process like on his films? And is there a back and forth sorry, is there a new film in the works?
Well, new film in the works. I don't know what the future holds. I got to tell you that. But the spotting process is very much Jordan. Really, he's really a visionary. He's an auteur. He has really strong and unique and exciting artistic and a strong, unique, exciting artistic aesthetic. And he kind of is a student of all media and cultural references and figures out ways they relate in ways that astounds me. But he also loves collaboration. He wants to be challenged. And so the bar is set very high, but there's no one you'd want to set the bar higher than Jordan, and he'll often, when he doesn't like a piece of music, he'll say, "This challenges me." And what that means is he doesn't like it, but he's not afraid of the fact he doesn't like it. It's forcing him to think about the music or the scene in a different way. And that's what he wants. And so how lucky is anybody who has the ear of someone who's that talented, who wants to have their own ideas expanded. So in spotting, often Jordan will, choose some temp music, but he also has me write demos away from picture. And I've stopped telling him what scene they go for, even because I want to see where he puts them. Because as the writer director, if he likes the music, he'll definitely know where it goes. He doesn't need me to tell him. So often pieces he'll put in a place that I had no expectation would go in that scene. And that helps me understand how he's hearing the characters. And it's something I had never expected, but it's a very creative way to work.
It's fun. When I heard, Get Out, I could tell that you had a background that wasn't really a film score background, but more as a modern classical background, which brings us to our question from Tyler Kinnear. Thanks for your time today, Michael. I'd love your perspective on transitioning or bridging from classical music to film music in a career sense. Did you have a lucky break, and tips for those trying to break in?
So I for sure had a lucky break, which is that my concert music, some of it was on YouTube, and where it got, it's concert music. So it got, several dozen hits. But one of them was Jordan Peele, who was looking for someone to score his first film, which was called Get Out. Now, that's an incredible, incredible lucky break. But that lucky break came decades after I had tried to break into the industry and was willing to just do anything to be able to be a part of the industry, and could not seem to do it for the life of me. And that lucky break worked for me. But the reason it did was because I had been writing music that whole time. And there was a body of work for someone to discover. And I had also done some scoring of TV and radio commercials when I was in college. And I remembered working for clients and figuring out how to make the music work for what it was they were trying to pitch, and all the things, all the business parts that go into being a media composer. And I also realized that it's about the storytelling. The music for media is about the storytelling, and it's not about primarily your artistic vision. And people ask me how to break in, and I find it funny because clearly, if you listen to my story, I clearly don't know how to do that. I don't know why people would ask me, but what I do know is that there are lots of filmmakers who want to tell stories, and they need composers to help them do that. And if you are about helping tell their character's story, you're a person that they want to know. And so you need to align yourself with filmmakers at a similar level of craft and level of the career as you, and offer to help tell their characters' stories. And I believe if you say it in that way, not how can I get my music placed in your film, that they'll understand that you are someone with whom they can collaborate.
Very, very true. Now, in Acolyte, you've got a song, you've also got voices, and that brings us to a question from Dale. Your use of the human voice in scoring is absolutely riveting. Can you share some of the unique ways you've conjured sound from your voice collectives in terms of notation, conducting, and coaching?
Wow. Well, I sang in choirs every day growing up as a kid, and I very much have a singing background. And even though uh, it's kind of way in the past for me, I've never forgotten what it's like to be a singer. And I think of myself as one, although I wouldn't dare do it in public. Uh, so I sing. I sing a lot to myself. um, I sing to my assistants when they're as unfortunate enough to hear it. But the reason I do that is because it's an instrument from which you can conjure the most natural instrumental sound and vocal sound from just doing it yourself. You don't need to be a singer to be able to understand, oh, this will work and this won't, because it's what feels natural in the voice is always a great starting point for a lot of things. When it comes to finding unique sounds, it helps for a musician to know that singers are different and that singing comes from the body, and it's very much a part of every person who sings. And therefore it's a lot like acting. It's a physical manifestation. And so singers don't need to just sing notes. They need to understand what the meaning of those notes, even if it's not even a language. And often when I coach singers, I do it from acting. I feel like a director of a play or something. When it comes to, I've said on more than one occasion to, singers on a Jordan Peele film, I look at them, I say, I'm not afraid of you. And that's not a note about, the C sharp is flat. It's just like, you're not communicating to me. And that's a very valid note to give a singer in a scene where they're supposed to be terrifying. I would never tell a trombone player that. Even if the note they were playing was supposed to be terrifying, it's just not a thing. So that's how I get different sounds, is because I'll paint a picture. If there's a sound I want from a singer, I'm not looking for the notation. I'm going to explain to them a feeling that they need to evoke. And I'm going to coach them like a director would coach an actor, and how to achieve that sound, and how to achieve that emotion for me, the listener.
Wow. Now, obviously, the Acolyte, it's got a lot of Crouching Tiger, Jedi foo. Also, Trinity gets wiped out in the first 5 minutes, as you said. I wasn't expecting that. I was pretty bummed out, but she shows up and somehow wipes out an entire bunch of Sith witches.
She does.
What did she do to him? When she put him in a coma or something? Tell about scoring that like a possessed Jedi Wookiee.
Yeah, so that was a very intense scene. A possessed Jedi Wookiee, and it was so far. It was so awesome to have a Wookiee Jedi. I was just like, oh my god! And then the things that happened to him, it's just not right. But meanwhile, he gets a really great lightsaber battle. So there's that, and unfortunately, he's his mind is being controlled by the Coven at that point. And Indara, I don't think means to kill them. I think she means to save the Wookiee. And in so doing, she has to sever the the mental tie that is going on between them. And I don't think she realizes that in the way she does that using the Force, that's going to kill all of them simultaneously. But that's an example now, and how the Force is able to do that, you can ask me, but it's above my pay grade. It's above my pay grade. But I will say that her accidentally doing that, I don't think she chose to do that, and so it's a chose to have them die. She certainly chose to save her fellow Jedi, and so I think that is a great example of things that happen in the Acolyte, where people who have the very best intentions still end up doing things that are not in isolation, things that they'd be proud of.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the fight, I mean, this actually, I think, might just have the fastest fighting I've seen in anything that is Star Wars. I mean, it is really fast. What was the challenge of scoring
It's
that?
pretty amazing. Yeah. Well, you gotta, I always think music is either emotion or action music, and I don't mean action music. I mean, it's describing actions of people, or things as they move. And the movement of all of those lightsaber battles is really the first thing I notice about them. And the music has to feel both, heroic, and there's a way, and it has to feel lighter than air, because sometimes they're jumping through the air, and the way they wield the sabers is as if you might expect them to take flight. So both those things are things that really inspired that music. Is the heroism, but also the athleticism and the sense of the actors and what they managed to train themselves to do.
Now, I really like the stranger, because he's just such a goofy freaking character. You don't know why the Jedi wouldn't slap him away for murder. Oh, we'll just let him go. It's like, what's going on? And it actually makes the reveal all the cooler when you find out this guy is the badass. I literally did not expect that to happen.
Oh,
but
good.
then after that, you have the episode where he's just kind of letting her hang around. Tell me about scoring this character.
Well, he's super fun because you can't figure out if you want to, be him or kill him or root for him or what, which is kind of the idea. So he represents a kind of he represents the wild card, that is not, he may do bad stuff, but he doesn't seem to align himself with any, affiliation, but as the wild card, he occurs in different ways, and each of those ways is fun to score and show off that side. Much as I imagine Manny really would have loved playing the character in that way. So there's a horror aspect of him when he is doing horrific things and when he's being so terrifying. And there's a more standard baddie sort of thing about him. But then there's also this seductive side. That's the type of music it's like liquid chocolate in a different way. But then it's also like, to me, it's like it's one part liquid chocolate, but then also the guilt you feel of, like, if you had too much, it's present in the enjoyment. Is the regret is present in the enjoyment? How about that?
Yes.
So that's what the music of episode 6 is about. It's the seduction and feeling uncomfortable about it at the same time.
No, very, very cool. I mean, there are a couple of really great whoa moments in the show, and one of them is suddenly when they have all these Jedi who you think you're going to be hanging out with for a couple of seasons to come become the red shirts. What was it like scoring these all these?
Goodbye.
Yeah.
There's that moment where it's a great moment where the stranger just goes like that or something, and they all go. And the music of their reaction is this giant brass cluster, and a cluster just means a chord that isn't found in nature because it's all dissonant. And the reason that seemed like the natural choice is because brass instruments involve a lot of wind, and you can just feel the air pushing them away. And it's actually the Force, but it looks like a giant gust of wind pushed them, and so it just seemed natural to have a lot of air being blown. And that was a thing that I felt like when I put it with I thought, yeah, this works. This is exactly what this is. And then there's a lightsaber battle when they all, as if they didn't run away from that. There's a lightsaber battle and they don't fare well, and they don't. so the battle is more about the athletic energy you see in the battle, and then it's not until you see them all dead that the horror of that sets in. So in each case, the music reacts to the thing that you see on the screen or the emotion that you'd be having in the moment.
I mean, like you have like an 80s action neck break in that thing. I'm like, what the? You know, I really let's talk about the master, the character. I'm sorry, I'm as good with names of these characters as you are maybe with Star Wars planets. But let's talk about Squid Game Dude.
Game dude. Okay.
Well, let's talk about yes. Let's talk about his character.
It seems like most people really like and relate to Soul, or just think that he's a good guy, and I felt like that. I find his acting to be so deep and emotional, and he's so believable in that earnest character, and just there's a theme you hear that is I think it's what I would call it, the aspirational side of the Force, the desire to better oneself, or to leave the world better than you found it, or and so you hear that theme over him, especially in the first few episodes, and you hear it over when young Osha first sees the Jedi ship on Brendok for the first time, and he's kind of like the heart of the show, I think.
Yeah, very, very true. Now, I just have to give a shout out to, I think, probably one of my favorite films you've ever scored, which is Landscape with the Invisible Hand. It's as unsung as The Acolyte is popular, but it's really an amazing film. It's almost like a kind of downbeat version of They Live, where everyone knows what's coming, and like literally people they're like sued by aliens. I mean, what was it like scoring that? Again, a very kind of capitalist satire about an alien invasion.
I loved it because it's a really shrewd story that is not anybody's. When you think of an alien invasion movie, this is the very last thing you think about in this movie. And it's in this movie, the setup is that the aliens have made contact, and they're friendly, and they have great technology, and because of that, they have very soon, very easily taken over the economy, and everybody either works for the aliens or they don't have a job, because everything about the aliens is just colonizes everything. So they really run the world, and the world is actually not better off for that. And and so because the aliens are fascinated by certain random things about humanity, those things they're willing to pay for. So as a result, these two young teens who are broke figure out that they can do a dating kind of podcast. It's a webcast. They put a thing on their brains, and you can see right through their eyes to what they're doing. And the aliens are fascinated by human dating. They just find it incredible. So they want to watch people go on dates. So the two teens agree to go on dates because they can get paid to go on dates. And that kind of puts a wedge in what might have been a real romance between them. And the concept of that is so smart, and metaphor for several different things, especially when they're the two teens are of different races. So Corey Finley, the director, also directed Bad Education, and he has this super smart, dry sense of humor, and he adapted the screenplay from the novella, and then he always likes to have music that's very much satirical, but in a way that you might not realize. So it was always his idea to have the theremin and to have it be like an old sci-fi throwback, but the music has to be very, actually genuinely emotional, not weirdly alien, but done with this weirdly alien sound. So you have this kind of cross-genre score. And then it also needs to sound, the score needed to sound also, because there's a depression, basically a worldwide depression, it had to sound a little meager. So there are some parts that we played on a small organ, and then some recorders that just sound sad, and some found percussion, and it's deliberately sounds inadequate in some ways.
Wow. And another recent score that you did that I really loved was The Burial, which is this really kind of wry, essentially a true life courtroom movie.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The Burial is the greatest story, and I love when people discover that movie, because it's one that really appeals to everybody, because when you get into it, you don't even realize what the story's about, and you don't know the turn it's going to take. But Jamie Foxx and Tommy Lee Jones are about the best odd couple you could possibly imagine, and they just draw you into that story and make you care and make you cheer for them. And it's a really fun ride. So the music is just about the music is really just about helping propel the story. And it's like, and now this little odd turn, and now that little odd turn. And even though it's a courtroom drama in some ways, it's also a story of systemic oppression that you don't see coming. And when it takes the turn it does at the end, you are left very satisfied and cheering. And it was a lot of fun to be able to help tell that story.
Now, you won a Nobel Prize for your opera Omar, and the Nobel Prize is something you think about books, not necessarily music. What was that like?
Well, Stephen Wright, the comedian, had this great line: "I'd kill for a Nobel Prize," but it was the Pulitzer Prize that I won. So I'm still hoping to win a Nobel Prize. I don't think that's going to happen, but I didn't think a Pulitzer Prize was going to happen either. And it was because of the opera Omar, which I co-wrote with Rhiannon Giddens. And it's about Omar ibn Said, who was born in Senegal and kidnapped and brought over on the Middle Passage and enslaved in the Carolinas, but he could read and write Arabic. And so his autobiography is in the Library of Congress as one of the only first-person narratives of an enslaved person. And in his story, which really happened, he had an owner who was a devout Christian and really was admiring Omar's scholarship, but also wanted to make sure he converted to Christianity. And so that kind of irony and hypocrisy is the stuff of opera. And we were able to use a lot of, Islamic inspired music and also very traditional American music, and kind of blend them when appropriate and clash them when appropriate. And it was a huge thrill to work with Rhiannon on that, and I had always had a goal of writing an opera, because just, one of the reasons I love Star Wars is because it's a space opera, and the idea of opera is something being larger than life and really telling a story that connects with the human experience. So that's my other opera.
So warping back into the Star Wars universe of the Acolyte, obviously no surprises. People tune in tomorrow by the millions, I assume. But what do you want people to come out with when this is over tomorrow? What has it been like for you to be part of this universe? Where do you want to go with it?
Well, I'd love to do a season 2, but I have no idea what the likelihood of that is, and I'm very much far down the process of when, and like I hear that if they are doing one, that means there's would be a good chance I'd do the score. But you find out those things as those decisions are made by people at a higher pay grade. But it's been really great to talk to people who have been intrigued by the story and to see it unfold. And I have enjoyed following on social. It's the first time I've really followed on social media about a series, and what people are thinking about it, and to see people posting about their thoughts about what's happening has been really fun. It's been because you as a composer, you work so much by yourself in the dark, and any artist hopes, I think, to connect with people and help them feel and entertain them, and I can tell that that's going on with the Acolyte, and that's really gratifying, and I enjoy it a lot.
So I guess I'm going to wrap this question up with, I mean, in a way, having finished this, do you feel like you're in the Forest of Endor and you turn around and then suddenly you see like the Force ghosts of Max Steiner, Eric Van Korngold, John Williams, Michael Giacchino, all these people? I mean, when you've done this, do you feel
Mhm.
like you have tapped into a force, as it were?
Wow. You know, maybe a little. I think yeah, I mean, I often think of the composers, the media composers who've come before and did it all with pen and paper, you know, and just I'm in awe of what they have been able to achieve and what they did. And I if I am following in their footsteps, I'm very honored by that. And I just hope that I would do the legacy of those talented people proud.
Well, Michael, I just want to congratulate you on the Acolyte and thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. And we all to watch the Acolyte on the finale tomorrow night on Disney Plus with Michael's score on Walt Disney Records. And thanks to our show producer, Dale Turner, Ray Costa, and Sam DeFrank at Costa Communications, executive producer Mark Northam, and graphic designer Mark Banning. And tune into the next Film Music Live on July 25th at 10 a.m. as Job Sinelli, childlike princess Tammy Stronach, and co-star and writer Greg Steinbrenner join us to tell the fractured fairy tale of man and witch. I'll see you there. Bye, everyone.